Wayne, I was just conscious of the fact that a number of students from the global majority do struggle with their trainings and in relation to your work with universities, how's that been
Mm.
received?
I think the work with students being and universities has been well received in terms of anti-racism. That is it,
Yeah,
anti-racism specific. Your
yeah,
question, yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
Mm,
yeah, I think in terms of the resources that we've produced and the presentations that we've done, the
mm,
campaigns that we've run around the experiences of students, for example, as well,
mm,
representations that we've made to the regulator recently about some of the experiences of students,
mm,
practice educators, and newly qualified social workers.
yeah.
We've fed that feedback back to the regulator and other stakeholders as well. So I feel that organisationally, we've really tried to spotlight the issues, not just for students, but for social workers throughout their career in terms of the experiences that they're having. And overall, I
Mm,
think people have been fairly, shall I say, receptive to that. But, we're very lacking in terms of action, which I think
mm,
most people would agree with. So
yeah.
that's something that we're still banging the drum for, really.
Mm, mm.
Nice. And so, when I wanted to ask you, what have been some of the challenges that you've experienced being a black male social worker?
Yeah, they've been multifold, really. Sometimes covert, very few times overt, fortunately. I'll touch wood with that because there's always time. But yeah, mainly I would say covert and in the form of, um, well, yeah, just sort of underhandness or being overlooked. Um, Sort of sometimes the dynamics within the workplace and so on. Um, it might be around sort of unfavorable decision making or kind of unfair decision making with managers and so on, bullying sometimes, which you might not be able to pinpoint as racism, but there perhaps there's a race
Mm,
element to it. So yeah, it has been difficult, and I'm sure there's lots of people who some of that stuff would resonate with as well. It's not been easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate that I've had, usually, when I've been in a real sort of tight spot, I've had good people around me. Um,
Nice.
there's been lots of individuals over the years when I look back who've almost just been like sort of guardian angels, really, I suppose, kind of
mm,
kindred spirits that I needed in that moment, and they were able to just sort of give me what I needed, so I was able to kind of move on to the next phase.
yeah.
Yeah, I was really sort of grateful to the people who've helped me and who continue to help me really in my life.
Oh, thank you for
Mm,
that. And it's really nice to hear and how you've been able to navigate around that. So I appreciate that you sharing that with us
Hmm.
today, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean it's quite a hard subject, and you
mm,
mentioned things like the bullying, harassment, microaggressions sometimes.
Oh
yes.
yes, that's it.
Like you said, so it's sometimes hard to pinpoint and to evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
the experiences, and like you said, having strong advocates around you or support people who will step in to support.
Yeah.
And it kind of links into some of what you mentioned about what's going on for students in social work.
Mm,
Hmm.
Even for us, the work that we do supporting students and still seeing students come through the profession having real difficulties on placement. And
Yeah.
I mean, I know BASW is doing some work around that, but there are times when you kind of wonder, is there enough being done? As well as I think recently Skills for Care did a survey that said that there's a higher percentage of people from global majorities who actually fail
mm,
Hmm. Oh
student
yeah.
placements who fail courses, and
Hmm.
more so black black males.
mm,
And I guess it's that question of, I mean, what else can be done? Like,
mm,
are
Yes.
we doing enough? And if not, what else can we do, Wade?
yeah.
Well, not that I feel like I've got all the answers. I definitely haven't. But as you say, there is very much a need there. There's very much a void there in terms of support and kind of real action. So there's always more that can be done. I think some of it is really around that continued momentum around
Mm,
anti-racism and around equality, diversity, and inclusion, if we frame it that way, or around anti-oppression and anti-discrimination, if we frame it that way. For me, I feel that sometimes as a profession, we perhaps get caught in circular conversations around topics like anti-racism and social justice, because there's just so many words. There's a kind of confetti of words around some of this stuff. And yes, they have meanings and definition, but actually, I think sometimes they're obstructive in terms of action. And then we sort of get into conversations around evidence, which of course is essential. But again, we can keep sort of chasing our tails around evidence when actually the evidence is there staring us in the face. We get into conversations of who created that evidence, or it's a hierarchy of evidence. And then it's just a kind of myriad, really, that becomes circular, and there's no real action taken. So, yeah, to answer your question in terms of what could be done, I think for me, very much around simplifying things, and something like the res, for example, for me would be a key instrument. And if we made that sort of mandatory, we'd automatically collect the evidence, and also based on the evidence we've already got, we could start to take some actions specifically around inclusion of anti-racism, anti-oppression, and anti-discrimination in the professional standards, for example. So that would mean straight away that people are being held to account around those, and it would be explicit. That's not going to solve the issues of racism, discrimination, and oppression, but it is a good starting point and reference point, I believe. And there's all sorts of actions. As I say, I haven't got all the answers, but what answers I have got and what BASW England have got, we are willing to work with whoever in order to make that happen.
Yeah.
Lovely.
You mentioned, is it rice?
Res.
Rice.
The
Could
res.
you explain a bit more for our audience and some of us who may not know these terms, what you mean by that?
Yes, forgive me.
Right.
I did
Yeah.
say it earlier, the workforce race and equality standards, but some of these frameworks, they're quite wordy, aren't they? Come on, let's face
Yes.
it. Sometimes necessary, but they are wordy. So yeah, the workforce race and equality standards. I think I mentioned earlier around the data collection, around recruitment and retention, disciplinary for Black and global majority social workers, people who work in social care broadly. And it's obviously going to be very useful and informative to collate that data. And there is different actions and steps that could be taken off the back of that. And for me, there's a clear case to make it mandatory at this point. But obviously, we're going through a process of gathering evidence of pilot local authorities, etc., coming on board. It's really fantastic the work that's taking place so far. As I say, I believe there's already a strong case to kind of make it mandatory. I think when that happens, that will be beneficial on lots of different levels for social work. There's obviously a recruitment and retention crisis, which is well documented, has been for a long time. For me, something like the res could be pivotal in addressing something like that, because it speaks directly to it, it interrelates. And by making it mandatory, it sort of combines that and strengthens the whole thing. But I'm not I'm not an organizational development specialist or anything like that. I've told you my humble beginnings, but in my mind that makes logical sense. But we'll see the direction of travel.
Okay. Wayne, you've got so much experience. It's so interesting to hear
Thank
and
you.
learn more about you.
Thanks.
So, what advice would you give to someone that's looking to enter the field?
Well, firstly, to say thank you, for your experience. As I say, it's not being necessarily deliberate or intentional. It's just kind of ended up that way, really. So, thank you for that. Secondly, in answer to your question, what advice would I give? I think my advice would be to, best you can, stay true to yourself, really, and your well-being, those of people that you work with and your colleagues and so on. Do the best you can in that regard, and I suppose recognize that being employed in social work is difficult. There's no two ways about that, but it's also very rewarding as well, as I've tried to kind of highlight in some of the different roles that I've had. So there's definitely challenges and rewards, but I think really staying true to who you are and kind of speaking when you need to speak, in terms of expressing how you feel about people you're working with, or the working conditions,
Mm,
or relationships within the working environment. I think stuff like that's really quite important, but there's obviously ways and means in which to do that. And not doing it at all when there are things to be said can be, kind of destructive, I think, internally as well. So there is a balance. So yeah, I think primarily that's what I'd say. Stay true to
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah, because I'm trying. Yeah.
Use your voice.
yeah.
And I mean, I had another question about the res, or maybe a
Mm,
comment question. But
Mhm,
I mean, how likely is it that the government is gonna implement this as mandatory? I've come in contact with it before. So did some peer review work with another local authority that had used it,
mhm,
and it was really interesting to see how the data was collected around, things like you said, like recruitment and retention, things
mm,
like how many people from global majorities progress up,
That's
things
right.
like,
Career progression. Yeah.
pardon me.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Career progression.
Yeah.
I was just agreeing.
mm,
Yeah.
Yeah, and disciplinary. And you realize that in organizations, there is still a disproportionate number of people from global majorities who are taking down things like disciplinary
mm,
or performance capabilities, for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
So the data is there to support
Mhm.
it. So I
Mhm.
guess my question is, what stops the government,
Yeah.
mhm.
or what stops the policymakers from making this mandatory, Wayne? I mean, are the government really committed to anti-racism?
I'm probably not best placed to answer that, to be honest, given my role. I take your point. I take your
Mhm,
point. I think it's just one of those things that we have to keep the momentum up in terms of the importance of anti-racism, and anti-oppression and anti-discrimination, equally, and highlight how that's really kind of not the case for not just social workers, but across society, really. Obviously, the people
yeah.
we work with, communities as well. Um, and I think the more we can make a case and bang the drum, and mobilize kind of movements around some of this stuff, that's, I think, how we get
Mhm,
politicians to take it seriously, and policymakers.
mm,
Um, Organizations like BASW, I mean, you might think, oh, you might say that because you're biased, but I do think that our campaigning arm at BASW has kind of exemplified that, really, across many
yeah.
different campaigns. We've had
Mm,
some good wins. There's somewhere we need to still keep pushing. That's the
mm,
reality of
Mm,
that intersection, I think, between politics and social work, really. Yeah.
yeah.
mm, mm. Yeah, yeah. And I know you mentioned the issue of recruitment and retention is it's quite an issue, and because of that, a number of local authorities are having to go abroad and recruit social workers from abroad. I was just wondering, with Baswa, ha- have you had any involvement with supporting social workers from abroad, or is that something that's in your radar?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's not something I've been involved with directly, but at BASW, we do have a diaspora special interest group that
Oh,
consists of
mm,
social workers across diasporas,
mm,
and they have their committee and their work streams that they're involved in. As I say, I'm not
mm,
directly involved in that, and a lot of my work has tended to focus on, let's say, the Black
mm,
British or the sort of British
Mm,
global majority perspective. But there's
yeah,
obviously a clear need there as well to amplify, diaspora
mm,
colleagues and the experiences that they have. And so
yeah,
that special interest group does that.
Um,
lovely. Sounds
Yeah.
good. That sounds really good.
Mhm.
it's good.
So
Yeah.
earlier on, Wayne, you mentioned about talking about some of the anti-racist work that you've previously had been completing and doing.
Hmm.
I'm just curious, what's on your radar for future,
Okay.
if you're
Well,
able to share that, of course.
yeah, I'll try to think about what I can say. Yeah, some stuff
Yeah.
I can't really divulge just yet. But yeah, in terms of the BPS, they're currently working with the PC&D group, as I mentioned before, around that synergy sessions episode and look after your practice educator. So that's really going to be a focus over the next few couple of weeks or so, in terms of recording and editing and things like that. Um, Also, there's another episode which we're hoping in the future to do around the anti-racism supervision template, which the BPS and School of Shabs developed.
mm,
Yes.
Yeah. So those are sort of VPS related projects on the horizon. Um, Also in May, I'll be speaking at the West Midlands Social Work Teaching Partnership practice educator event around professional identity and how that relates to professionalism, some elements of anti-racism, and some of my social work career I've talked about. Um, I say that um, not to brag, but really just to sort of say I'm not an academic. So when I sort of speak at these events, I'm very self-conscious, I suppose, around the fact that many colleagues are academics, they've got an academic background, or they work in higher education institutes, but I don't. And as you know about my sort of past, I've not really worked in that environment, but obviously within my role and some of the work I'm involved in now, it sort of it interrelates, But I am just self-conscious that that's not quite. I'm not at that level. Yeah, I'd like to be, but I don't think my sort of I don't think I have it about me really to progress in that way. So I'm quite happy if people want me to speak from my perspective in terms of what I've talked about. Then great, but obviously it's not academic.
Yeah.
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 Lovely.
Anyway,
Thank you so much.
thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks, Wayne. And question that comes to mind, and let me try and frame it properly, is thinking about some of the work you're doing around anti-racism. Has there been any drawbacks from it? Have there been any challenges or difficulties? I mean, I've found sometimes that in some spaces when you're quite vocal around anti-racism, it's sometimes caused some people to feel a little bit threatened. I mean, probably not been your experience, but I just wondered, have you experienced any challenges around that?
Well, I would say it's inherent, really, with anti-racism. For some reason that does escape me, but there is a degree of inevitability around
Mm,
experiencing some level of resistance, whether you're talking about it or campaigning around it, or
mm,
kind of involved in some of the stuff that I've done and that BASW England have over the past few years, especially. And it comes in different forms because
mm,
obviously that's racism. That's the nature of
yeah,
racism,
yeah,
kind of multi-dimensional
yeah,
and quite sophisticated, really,
Mm.
and evolves as well. And so,
Yeah, definitely.
um, because of that, there has been sort of multi-layered resistance, and I just think, well, um, I'm sort of. I've always just spoken my truth, really, as far as
Mhm.
anti-racism is concerned. So,
mm,
it's sort of like people might disagree, and fair enough, because obviously everyone's entitled to their opinions. But
Mm.
that's why I sort of labour the point that I'm not an academic, I suppose, because
mm,
quite often I am just speaking from my personal perspective,
Mhm.
or sometimes with the BASW hat on from professional perspective, but never
Mhm.
from an academic standpoint. I mean, there are times that I have, for example, I coordinated a report a few years back around the activities of around anti-racism across England, and that was quite an academic sort of type report, possibly. Um, I've got a social work degree, obviously, because I'm a registered social worker, but that's where my academic experience kind of ends. Like I say, I'm not the most academic. I struggled just to get to that point. So I've swum to shore. I'm happy on the beach at the moment. I'm not looking at scaling the mountain, as far as academia is concerned. Um, but yeah, I think in terms of resistance, because of the trajectory I've had, there have been moments where it has been tough, and I have thought, "Gosh, should I just give up? Should I just stop this? Should I just keep my mouth shut?" But then I sort of think, well, that's the problem, really. In a way, that's what, as a people, has kind of held us back. The fact
Yeah.
that there is this kind of compliance and conformity, and
mm,
kind of silence. And yeah, I just think, well, actually, that goes against the sort of who I am, really. So I think, yeah, it's sort of do or die in a way. Yeah,
mm. Yeah, keep going, keep
yeah,
on the way.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I say, I have to reiterate, my role isn't specifically around anti-racism. So
Mm,
when I
Mm.
say do or die now, it's sort of like I feel like I'm spreading my energies across different kind of portfolios, really. Some that relate to
mm,
anti-racism, some that don't. And I've
mm,
got to be honest, some of the ones that don't, I'm just as welcoming of at this stage in my life, because
Mhm.
it allows me to diversify. You know,
Yeah.
I sort of don't want to be labelled as the anti-racism guy, even though I know I probably will
Yeah.
be. You know, sort of, you know, I'm realistic about that. But yeah,
Mm,
equally, I kind of think, well, you know, I'm not a one-trick pony. Actually, there's
No,
a few other
no,
tricks in
yeah.
there.
no.
Maybe not an extensive repertoire, but there's a few other tricks. You know, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
but yeah, you know, there's a few other areas within social work that really sort of interest me. So
Mm,
I'm really pleased that my sort of role at BASW allows me to, you know, kind of explore those. Really,
No,
yeah.
it is,
yeah.
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 And it's exhausting work, isn't it?
Mm,
Anti-racism.
Mm,
Sometimes,
mm,
when you get caught up in, well, not caught up, but when you're kind of having to focus on the data and what's happening. And, there are
mm,
times when, myself being part of some of the anti-racist conversations, and people just
yeah.
express being exhausted and tired.
Mm, mm. Oh yeah.
Um, and having to encourage people to actually, Martin Luther King had a dream and he died.
Mm,
And we are that dream,
yeah.
mm,
and hopefully some of the work we're doing now will have an impact maybe years to come for
Mm,
mm,
children as well.
precisely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the aim, isn't it?
mm,
Really. In that if we don't say or do anything, then who will?
yeah.
Um, and I think it's that reality that kick-started me really in 2020.
Mm,
So yeah, hopefully, you know, that's contagious, and for all the right reasons. You know, I think it's about that positive disruption, not just disruption for disruption's sake.
Mm,
mm,
It really is about being constructive as opposed to destructive, I think,
mm,
in a geeky sort of way. You know, I do really
mm,
sort of identify as a social worker in the sense that I do want the best for the profession. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
Obviously, I want to level up as far as black and global majority social workers are concerned, but
mm,
across the board, don't really
yeah.
care what kind of social worker you are. The fact you're a social worker is like, you know, let's
Mm,
amplify your voice, which is kind of
yeah,
why I find myself at BASW doing what I'm doing.
definitely.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I'm gonna use your example of where you said you're the and they want to be the anti-racist guy, or
Mhm,
the face of it, and I totally understand that. And
Yeah, I don't want to be.
as well.
Yeah.
Was there anything else to add to that? That any other disciplines or any other areas that you have kind of dipped your toes into at this stage that you haven't already mentioned?
No, not really. I suppose. Do you mean sort of professionally, kind
Yeah,
of?
yeah,
Yeah, not really. No, I think I've sort of put a lot of energy into the social work activities that I've been involved in with BASW England over the past few years, and some of the other stuff that's interested me has been more stuff unrelated, I suppose. So like running and cycling. That I was sort of loving that really during COVID, being able to go for runs on the road and they were just completely empty roads and stuff, you know, that was good. But yeah, I'm just a simple guy, me. I just like to keep it as simple as possible. So, you know, less complications, the better, because probably because I've just got enough going on with the work stuff.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I suppose one other thing that has interested me has been sort of like visual art and graphic design that I've tried
Okay.
to integrate into some of the projects, and just make them a little bit more visually appealing or, you know, mentally stimulating in some way.
yeah.
So that's been a bit of a geeky interest as well. But yeah, just
mm,
keeping it simple, really.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I was wondering from aside from Outlanders, I'm just wondering, do you have any other publications that you'd want to talk about maybe?
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, not books. No, sorry, that's the only book. Are you still angling there, Rose? Yeah, no, the books, and you know, I feel that actually, I think in my lifetime, I'd like to think I've got, and I could squeeze another book out, or could
Yeah.
want
Yes.
to read
Mm,
another book,
mm.
you know,
Back
or
to the
something
school
like that.
story
Good.
again.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I know.
Sorry, Wayne, can you
It's
just
just
repeat that? Sorry, I just wanted to. Something that you just said. I wanted to make sure I wasn't.
Yeah, I feel like I could squeeze another book out in my lifetime.
oh,
Lovely. That's
Yeah,
what I
that's what
need to
I
hear.
wanted.
Well
yeah.
done, Rose. Well done.
Wayne, I'm
Because
so sorry. I'd like to apologize on behalf of.
we're coercing me. Got my arm at my back here, virtually. Yeah. Um, but yeah, you know, I kind of
Mm,
that does appeal. I'm just, I suppose, very realistic about my time, and I have to steward my energy, as you can imagine. I'm sure you do as well. And I sort of very reluctant to overpromise and underdeliver on
Yeah.
stuff.
Of
So I
course.
think sometimes
Yeah.
that probably comes off a bit blunt, but I don't intend for
No,
that. But it's
no.
just like being realistic. I can't really agree to doing that, or having to navigate situations. So yeah, I mean the book. Yeah, I think in my lifetime I'd like to think there's another one that I could do, and I'd love to do something like that with Siobhan McLean again.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
but it's just time limited, as I was saying. In terms of
Mm,
the publications, I suppose it's been mainly articles in the past, nothing
yeah.
that recent.
Mm,
Um, and I sort of got a lot from writing those at the time. They were like, I suppose, a platform for me to be able to express how I was feeling at the time around, post George Floyd, the landscape as I saw it, as far as anti-racism, etc., and experiences of Black and global majority social workers. I tried to sort of make some suggestions about how I thought it could be improved. Because, like I
mm,
say, I'm very keen to not be seen as
mm.
angry Black guy for a start.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
but
hard to be.
also,
You're
Yeah.
so calm, Wayne.
well, I try. Not
Mm,
always like that. Again, I'm sure my wife would have a little wry smile there about that. But yeah, I tried to be calm. I definitely don't want to come across. Obviously, sometimes as a human being, you are angry. I was angry about what had gone on with
of
George
course.
Floyd, and I look back at some of the articles and I think, oh gosh, yeah, that's really kind of obvious
Mm,
that it came from an angry place. I'd
mm,
like to think most people who read the article, who it resonated with, would realise that, oh, that was really, like, maybe he made a few valid points, but yeah, he was a bit angry then. But we can kind of understand why, I'd like to
mm,
think people might think that. Some of the other articles I tried to be a bit more constructive with and
mm,
hopefully offer a few solutions or suggestions.
mm,
There was a few more critiques in there, but I'd like to think there's some constructive comments even within those really as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of the articles you've written have been for social work news,
mhm,
and I'm asking, suggest, I'm assuming so. But also wanted to ask you to, if you feel comfortable to talk a bit about some of the work you're doing online. 'Cause I noticed you have an online platform. You do have an online following,
Mhm.
and you mentioned the synergy sessions. But I type in Wayne Reid in YouTube, and there's quite a few
All right.
things
Yeah.
coming up. And
mm,
recently, I did some work with RIP, and there were some videos that you've done with Des Holmes.
Oh
So
yeah.
they, I mean, you're quite humble about it, but just wanted
mm,
to give you the opportunity to talk about some of that stuff that you've been doing
Thanks.
online.
Thank you for looking at some of the work first and foremost, and I hope it chimed for you as well. I know not everybody's going to agree with everything that I have to say all of the time. That's just life. But I do appreciate people kind of taking the time to have a look at it, so or listen to it. So thank you.
Mm,
Um, in terms of the diversity of the work streams and some of that stuff, I suppose it's just been like. Been an opportunity to externalize different things. So that's why some of it's quite multifaceted. That's sort of suited me in a way because um, different kind of things that are going on. I think sometimes it's perhaps a better platform to deliver that stuff, or it might suit my sort of way of working or coordinating and the people who were in my orbit at that time. Primarily BASW members, I have to sort of really give a hard salute to all BASW members that I've worked with over the last 5 or so years, because there's just been such a breadth of experience and skills and knowledge that people have brought. And, I couldn't have done, and myself and BASW England couldn't have done anything like what we've done without them. So, whether that's BPS members, PCND group members, criminal justice group, there's been subgroups, external partners, research and practice, like you've said, but also community care. I feel like
mm.
I'm doing some kind of roll call, and I wish I'd prepared like a proper list if I was going to do that.
Yeah,
But,
wow.
there's all sorts of people out there and organisations that who know who they are. I'd like to think as well that they've really helped the movement, BASW England, myself, the message. everything that we've tried to deliver, really. Yeah.
mm,
Amazing.
mm.
Amazing. And one of the things we'll do as part of this episode is to post some of the links below in the description box, just so people can get to go and listen and learn more about Wayne Reid and see some of the other fantastic things that you're up to.
And BASW England, I've got to add.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not just me. Not just the
yeah.
Wayne Reid show, like you say. No, like I say, I have to give a lot of respect to the BASW members, but also the BASW team as well, and colleagues, people behind the scenes who put a lot of time and effort, and they're passionate about what they do as well. It isn't always seen, but a lot of the work couldn't be done without them. So definitely not the Wayne Reid show. Tuesday, but I call it the BASW England show.
Bless.
That's
Bless.
lovely.
Last questions, ladies.
I'm just going to ask, what's the biggest takeaway you would hope that the listeners would take from learning and hearing about you today, Wayne?
I think the biggest message I would like to convey on this is just to, I suppose, reiterate what I've just said around, I might have been on the front of shelf with a lot of this work, but actually there's a lot of time and effort and energy from a lot of other people to make this stuff happen. I have to give a special props, I suppose, to my line manager, Mary Stratulis, who from day one has kind of had my back. The team, it's been a sort of transient team. We've had some ever-presents, but people have come and gone from the team. But Liz Howard, Denise Monks, Rebecca Pierre was on the team, but is no longer with BASW, but made huge contributions. The admin team as well, just fantastic, really, in terms of scaffolding what we have to do. So yeah, and like I say, the members. I could be here all afternoon listing names. Trust me. But yeah, they know who they are, and the organisations know who they are as well, and people who contributed. Just really, really grateful. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I would attest
yeah,
to that.
that's the
Yeah.
last.
Yeah, because actually Maris has actually attended a few of the BPS sessions, and
Yes.
the fact that she's found the time is just and
Yeah.
she just comes about with a nice good energy
That's
and
it.
that supportive nature. So
Yeah.
I've
And I would say super authentic as far as anti-racism is concerned. Like I said, from day one of myself and others doing this work, she's been really, really supportive of the movement. So couldn't have asked for any better, really. I also have to give some special props to my mentor, who some people might be familiar with, a guy called Andrew Thompson from the AAA Chinwag, which was a project that I did in 2021. And yeah, still in a lot of contact with Andy, and he's been a major, major kind of support in my life as well on lots of different levels. So, but there's also other people, my wife, my family, my friends, and there's lots of other colleagues. I've got to give props to Chantel Thomas as well. Yeah, just the list goes on.
a long list. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just for our listeners as well, I know we've mentioned some of the stuff that you where you feature. Where can they follow you? Where can they find you, Wayne? Any social media platforms in particular?
Yeah, I try and keep it low key these days, really, as far as social media is concerned. I feel like the climate's changed. It's not quite what it was, and it just feels a little bit hostile, I suppose, on some of the platforms I have been on. Obviously, Twitter or X has changed quite a lot in the last few years. I find mainly LinkedIn really is the main one that I'll use, but even that I'm a bit touch and go with. Yeah, just really trying to keep it low key, really, and hopefully, just let the work with colleagues and things just speak for itself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Anita did say earlier that we will share some of those handles, i.e. your LinkedIn,
Thank
and
you.
some of the
Yeah.
videos for people to view.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Any last questions from ladies? No? At all?
No.
Any last
Thanks.
comments from you at all, Wayne?
Just to say thanks so much for having me on your podcast. It's a real pleasure. It's been really, it's been so kind of nice and natural, been good conversation. And yeah, it's just been really good kind of supporting you, Sherelle, as well with your new venture, being a BPS member, exemplifying what I was saying earlier on around individual members of the group having kind of, these skills and knowledge and expertise. It's just so nice to see you kind of utilizing that on your own platform with these two sisters. So wicked.
Oh,
Ah,
Wayne,
exactly.
all I want to say on behalf of Art Logos, we appreciate you. Thank you for
Thank
finding
you.
the time
Hmm.
and being our first online guest as well, which is amazing.
No,
Yes.
And learning more about your journey, your story, and what the future's to hold. We look forward to seeing that and wishing you all the best in all
thank
your
you.
future
Yeah.
endeavors. Yeah,
Thanks
absolutely.
so much. Yeah, I look forward to kind of keep doing people proud. Hopefully.
You do.
And
You
yeah,
do.
that's my hope.
Lovely. Perfect. And
Thank
last
you
to
so
say,
much.
thank you to our listeners as well. We can't forget about them. I just felt like it was just all about us.
I know.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And we do appreciate you. Please like, follow, comment, and subscribe. We've got other guests lined up for you. And once again, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to Art Logos.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
Yeah.
you.